Centuries ago, survival was not about progress, it was about endurance. Medieval villagers faced famine, plague, and war, yet their communities endured for generations. Today, in the heart of America, the Amish live by nearly the same rules, without electricity, without machines, without the modern lifelines we take for granted. How is it possible that a way of life forged in the Middle Ages still thrives in the 21st century? What did medieval villagers know about resilience that we have forgotten? And why do the Amish remain living proof that those lessons still matter? The medieval world was a fragile one. Between the 9th and 15th centuries, Europe's villages stood as islands of survival in a sea of uncertainty. Famine could strike with a single failed harvest. Disease, like the Black Death, could erase entire communities in weeks. Armies marched, borders shifted, and yet the village endured. Its strength was not in castles or kings, but in the rhythms of ordinary people, the plowman, the miller, the shepherd. They lived by cycles of the land, bound together by faith, labor, and mutual dependence. Survival meant simplicity. Tools were wooden, power came from animals, and every hand was needed. A village was not just a place, it was a system, a living organism where cooperation was the difference between life and death. Centuries later, the Amish remained tethered to those same principles. In their barns and fields, we see echoes of medieval Europe. Horse-drawn plows, communal barn raisings, bread baked from grain grown steps away. While the modern world races forward, the Amish preserve a way of life that medieval villagers would recognize instantly. Their survival is not an accident. It is a deliberate choice to keep alive the wisdom that once sustained entire civilizations. In today's world, gardening is often seen as a hobby, a weekend pursuit, a patch of green behind the house. Yet beneath the surface lies a hidden struggle. Modern gardeners face soil that is tired, stripped of nutrients by decades of industrial farming. They battle pests that have grown resistant to sprays, weeds that return no matter how many chemicals are poured onto them, and a dependency on store-bought fertilizers that promise growth but quietly erode the land's natural balance. The modern system is fragile. Bags of synthetic fertilizer, bottles of pesticide, and endless trips to the garden center create a cycle of dependency. Each season demands more inputs, more expense, more intervention. And when the supply chain falters, as it has in recent years, many discover that their gardens cannot stand alone. The soil is shallow, the resilience gone. Contrast this with the medieval village. There, soil was not a disposable medium, but a sacred inheritance. Fields were rotated, animals grazed in cycles that restored fertility, and composting was not a trend, but a necessity. Every scrap returned to the earth. The Amish continue this rhythm today. Manure enriches fields, rotations prevent exhaustion, and pests are managed by diversity rather than chemicals. Modern gardeners often struggle because they have been taught to fight nature rather than cooperate with it. The medieval villager and the Amish farmer understood that survival meant partnership. Their systems were slower, yes, but stronger. They built fertility over generations, not seasons. They accepted limits, and in doing so, created abundance that endured. The problem is not that modern gardeners lack tools, it is that the tools they rely on weaken the very foundation they seek to nurture. Soil becomes lifeless, pests grow stronger, and resilience fades. The medieval village survived famine because its systems were communal and regenerative. The Amish thrive today because they still trust those same principles. So the question is not whether modern gardening can produce food. It can. The question is whether it can endure. And endurance, as history shows, belongs to those who build with patience, humility, and respect for the land. That is the lesson medieval villagers carried through centuries of hardship. That is the wisdom the Amish still embody. And that is the challenge modern gardeners must face, to rediscover resilience before convenience erodes it completely. Medieval survival was not a mystery, it was a method, a system built from necessity, refined by centuries of trial and error. And remarkably, it still works today. Let's break it down. 1. Crop rotation. Imagine a villager marking the seasons with wooden stakes, shifting fields each year. They rotated grain, legumes, and fallow land. This prevented soil exhaustion, restored fertility, and reduced pests. It worked because nature was given time to heal. Today, Amish farmers still rotate crops, proving that patience builds abundance. 2. Communal labor. A barn rising in a single day, dozens of hands lifting beams together. Medieval villagers survived because no one stood alone. Harvests, construction, even defense were shared tasks. It worked because cooperation multiplied strength. The Amish preserve this through barn raisings and collective harvests, where community is the insurance policy against hardship. 3. Animal integration. Oxen pulling plows, sheep grazing stubble after harvest. Animals were not separate from farming, they were part of the cycle. Manure enriched soil, grazing controlled weeds, and draft power extended human capacity. It worked because every creature had a role. Amish farms still rely on horses, cattle, and chickens to maintain this living balance. 4. Local self-sufficiency. A mill grinding grain from the same fields that fed the village. Medieval life was local by necessity. Food, tools, and shelter came from within walking distance. It worked because resilience grew from independence. The Amish echo this today, producing nearly everything they need within their own communities. These methods were not innovations, they were survival strategies. Medieval villagers lived by them because they had no choice. The Amish live by them because they choose to. And in that choice lies a powerful truth. Resilience is timeless. In Amish communities, the medieval method is not history, it is daily life. Crop rotations are carefully planned, manure enriches the soil, and barns rise through collective labor. Horses pull plows across fields, while families grind grain in mills powered by water or diesel engines kept deliberately simple. Their food, tools, and shelter are produced locally, reducing dependency on distant systems. What looks old-fashioned is, in truth, a living blueprint for resilience. The Amish do not preserve these practices out of nostalgia. They preserve them because they still work, and because survival is stronger when rooted in simplicity. Medieval systems were designed for survival. Every choice, crop rotation, communal work, animal integration, was about enduring hardship. Modern systems, by contrast, prioritize speed, profit, and convenience. They produce abundance quickly, but often at the cost of resilience. The Amish remind us that survival is not about efficiency, it is about balance. Their mindset values patience over speed, community over isolation, and stewardship over exploitation. For viewers, the lesson is clear. Resilience begins in the mind. To endure, we must think not in seasons or profits, but in generations. That shift in perspective is the true inheritance of the past. What can we learn from medieval villagers and the Amish today? Start small. Rotate crops in your garden. Give soil time to recover. Compost kitchen scraps and return nutrients to the earth. Integrate animals or natural allies, chickens for pests, bees for pollination. Share labor and knowledge with neighbors. Community multiplies strength. Grow something local and essential, not just ornamental. These steps may seem simple, but they build resilience. Each action reconnects us to a system that endured for centuries. Survival is not about complexity, it is about rediscovering the wisdom of simplicity. Centuries ago, medieval villagers survived famine, plague, and war by trusting in rhythms older than kings. Today, the Amish carry that torch, living proof that resilience is timeless. Modern systems may promise abundance, but they are fragile when stripped of patience and community. The lesson is not to abandon progress, but to remember what progress cost us. If we forget the old knowledge, we risk repeating the same fragility that once threatened entire civilizations. The past whispers a warning. Survival belongs not to the fastest, but to those who endure. And endurance begins with wisdom we must not lose.